Today I'm speaking with Braedon Flynn. What's up, buddy?
What's happening?
In the beautiful state of California, where it's always sunny and perfect and everybody's pretty.
We range from a brutal low 60 degrees to some high 80s on a bad day.
Here in the Midwest, California is like the mythical land.
There is a cloud in the sky today.
You saw a cloud. You know, here's something else that struck me that I just thought about, like probably an hour ago. I just thought, I'm interviewing Braedon Flynn. What, your name sounds like a hero, like a medieval knight. Like,
thank you.
You're the dude. You're the dude that like saves the princess. Is that?
I have saved a princess once.
You've done it. I knew it. I totally knew it. But to pivot from that, let's talk a little bit about who you really are in your not hero life.
Boring life. Go on.
Boring compared to that. You're married, you're a photographer, you have like 17 different things going on. Give me a little rundown on all that.
Yeah, I'll try to make it a little on the short side. I am a dad. I've got 4 kids, a wife who is amazing and takes care of a lot of stuff. I have, while I'm doing all these other projects I have going on, but I've been a professional photographer full-time for 8 or 9. I feel like I've been saying 8 years for a while, but let's go with 8 or 9 years, but doing photography for probably like 12 to 15 years. And
yeah.
Started out shooting bands and concerts, and could talk more about that as to how I used that strategy to get into concerts for free and shoot all my favorite bands and be on stage or against the stage. But from there, started shooting lifestyle. I grew up by the beach in Orange County, which most in Costa Mesa, where all of the surf culture really is, I guess, in terms of brands like Hurley, Billabong, Volcom, Ruka. All of them are right here. Quicksilver's in Huntington, the next city over. So a lot of that was very influential in my life as a kid that was a surfer and looked up to all these different professional surfers. On the other side, a lot of my friends ended up in the clothing world and either then working for those companies or starting their own thing. So I started as a photographer, started shooting more lifestyle for their brands, which was really fun, and got into fashion photography from there. Sort of fell into weddings as something I was avoiding because 10 years ago it was you're from that era of shooting weddings, correct?
Yes, I have shot some weddings.
You shot some weddings in your day. There's
second shot.
Yes.
Big difference.
Oh yes.
Big difference. In my opinion, there's a big difference.
Oh yeah. The dream was more being this high-end commercial fashion photographer, and weddings were that little thing where people were like, "Oh, that's cute. You shoot weddings," and But I always knew that I would love them because when I was a kid, I thought I was gonna be a trauma surgeon, or when I was playing baseball, I was a pitcher. I've always put myself in positions that are high stress, and I perform well in those situations. And I'm an extreme extrovert, love people, parties, and so weddings were actually a really neat fit of combining.
It sounds like you should be a wedding photographer.
Yeah, and really combining this editorial documentary thing that I had when I was shooting bands live, but then also more of the fashion editorial side. And the first handful of weddings I shot really were coming from that world of lifestyle, where it was either girls that were designers or stylists, and they were getting married with really hip friends at cool locations, and they wanted their wedding shot in a way that was not quite as traditional. And so I was able to come in there and do that in a way that was really fun and hip. And
it resonated with them because they saw your influence that you had from their fields. Is that fair to say?
Correct. Yeah.
So you kind of brought that in with you, of course.
Exactly. And then it was also
organically, probably.
Yeah, and it was also, for me, it felt very resonant because I really enjoyed that world. And so I was able to combine those two things and do it for someone. And it almost got to this point where I was feeling like I was giving people this gift where I can do this on their wedding day, and it was a really neat combination.
How self-aware were you at the time that was what was happening? In that you were probably different than a lot of other photographers at the time, but did you know it, and did you know why?
I had the idea in my head that I was actually a youth pastor when I was first starting out as well. So I was in commercial real estate and then
Oh my
left
goodness.
commercial real estate to be a youth pastor, which is a very great financial decision. And but it was a small one service little church, and the executive pastor really encouraged this bivocational life because like how in Orange County, which is not the cheapest place to live, how could you like do this for a long time? And so I was doing photography on the side, but it allowed
Right.
and when I'm educating other photographers, the thing that I say is like, listen, do not quit your day job, because if you are not in a place where you can actually support yourself financially, then it puts you in this place where you are desperate for work. And when you're desperate for work, you take anything that comes your way, whether or not it's actually a good product fit, whether it's a good client fit. And with that, I was actually able to be really picky. It's like my wife would probably argue and say, no, you said yes to everything. But, in my head, I was being picky. And I did it in a way like we could talk more about like how I was picky, but a lot of it came to do with how I was pricing, and I didn't really give my prices until I talked to a couple, and sometimes my prices
that right?
would be. Yeah, I still don't ever give my prices until I talk to a couple.
And so, but you do have standard pricing, does it fluctuate based on the variables that come with each different wedding? Is that a fair assumption?
It's a fair assumption. The answer is both. So there's definitely a standard, but most of what I'm doing today is it's like 3 to 4 day events. And so I'm usually getting an inquiry from a wedding planner versus a couple. Yeah. Typically, if a couple is inquiring with me, I'm out of budget. So if it's from a planner, then I'm asking the planner, like, hey, what are they looking for in their coverage? Like, if it's a destination event, which I'm mostly doing, is there a welcome dinner? Then are there like this coming weekend, I'm going to Napa, and there's going to be a welcome dinner. And then the next day, they're doing this event where it's croquet on the lawn, and I'm shooting that. Then there's the rehearsal dinner. Then there's the wedding day I think we have a holiday this weekend, but so the wedding's on Sunday, and then Monday is a brunch. So it's literally 4 days of events. And
so you're in a position where it behooves you to custom price virtually everything you do, because how could you have a standard that works across the board? Right?
I mean, I could have a base package where it just showed all these different situations and that, but typically I'm just putting together a custom package each time that's sort of based off of like my bar. Because sometimes a planner might want me to include pricing in the package, or they might want me to include travel in the package.
Right.
Mm-hmm. Or they might want me to have that as a line item after the fact, because the couple's a little more price sensitive and that number might seem higher compared to the other people I'm bidding against.
Right.
Or the couple might just want it all wrapped in because everyone that they're dealing with is from out of state, or everyone's local and want me to feel local as well.
So you typically are dealing with a liaison of sorts.
Yes.
In the planner. It's rare that you deal direct.
It's both. Typically, though, when the couple is not using a planner, basically, I generally know that they are out of budget. There's been a few times where it's like I'm the first thing that they're booking and they don't have a planner and they want a planner, and that works out really well. And then I'm able to actually refer a planner, which is a good thing to be able to do.
So that goes both ways too. I mean, you can refer them to somebody that they're looking for that you're familiar with.
Yes, which is fun.
I have a question that I don't want to forget about, and if we keep going, I'm going to forget. But tell me some of the bands you photographed, because I'm curious about that.
Oh, I photographed bands. I was shooting bands 4 nights a week and doing that for a lot of years until I started having kids. So I've shot just about. I started out in the hardcore like punk rock scene, which is really fun to photograph. I buddies with the guys in the band Thrice, and so I shot them a ton of times. They're sort of a Orange County sort of punk rock hardcore, but
I know of Thrice.
Yeah, they're really rad guys and fun to shoot because they're very animated and doing all sorts of stuff on stage. And then I was more into the indie rock folk scene, so shooting everyone from, I've shot the White Stripes. Arcade Fire was probably my favorite band to shoot. I shot them a couple times.
Wow.
Bright Eyes, I was into them Connor O'Burst for a long time. And then The Faint was really fun. They're just the same label. And so I mean, Sufjan Stevens. I shot the Black Keys, their first album when it was just the two of them.
Buddy.
That was amazing. really small. I think it was at the El Rey in LA, which is a pretty small venue.
Dan and Patrick, those boys can rock.
Yeah.
Also, very pastor-friendly bands, I feel like.
Yeah.
Like I know other pastors, and one in particular, like I think you just listed his like favorite band list there.
Probably.
Like, right down the line. So you moved from concerts or photographing bands, transitioned into the fashion industry. It seems pretty seamless. Like it all seems to make sense, especially being out where you're at. To go from bands to the fashion industry to weddings, and now you're primarily, for the most part these days, weddings. You don't do the concerts, you don't do fashion. For the most part, it's weddings. Is that true? Like weddings is your bag.
Weddings is my bread and butter, and
Right.
it's consistent. And with the higher price point, I am shooting less weddings than I used to. So with that, I still am a bit of a yes man. And so I shoot architectural photography. I've got a couple local architects. And so I'll do that. And that's more of a midweek thing. Or last night, for instance, I shot a 30th birthday party up in Beverly Hills at this ridiculous estate, just unbelievable. But, it's stuff like that where it's gigs for a couple grand
It's worth your time.
Yeah, it's worth my time, and it's sort of just getting another little midweek shoot in.
Yeah, and I would imagine that it's fun.
Yeah, it is. No, I would say that I have accumulated a really amazing clientele that are fun to work with. So,
given that, let's jump off of that and go to, for someone that's listening, where does somebody start? Because you're well into this successful career that you can look back and see the stair steps, right? But where does somebody begin if they think to themselves, you know what, I want to get there someday. I want to make that my purpose. I want to make that my goal to essentially do what you're doing. Where do they begin?
That is a great question. And I would recommend, for someone who's beginning, like I said earlier, don't quit your day job.
Right.
Be able to have something that's bringing in money, so you are not dependent on this craft to make money, because it puts you in this desperate situation. So that would be my first recommendation. The second recommendation is to shoot often and shoot all the time. And that is really how you start to develop what your taste is, what your style is, the things that you gravitate towards. Like some people, if you're a little bit more introverted, you might love architectural photography. You can come into a house, maybe the architect's there, maybe the designer's there, maybe the homeowner's there, but often you're there by yourself, just shooting at your own pace. Or being a food photographer, or or product photographer. But if you're someone who really loves engaging people and shooting in that sort of sense, there's all these other avenues. So starting out shooting friends, you can contact local model agencies and say, hey, do you have any young models that are looking to test? And start shooting them and take them in different locations, shoot indoors, shoot outdoors, learn all those different things. And, people will give you two different takes on emulating and copying another photographer's work.
Mm-hmm.
When I went to school for business at a college out here at USC, and I studied business. But after that, I went back and I took all the photo classes I could at a local community college, which happened to be the best community college photo department in the country, luckily. And they had a bunch of either working commercial photographers as teachers, or they had Brooks, which is a big photo school out here.
Yep.
That I think is no longer. But so it was really great.
It's done.
But I went through all of their classes, and I wanted to learn the difference of how to not just. I was already getting published in magazines while I was, from shooting bands and all that sort of stuff. But I wanted to learn the difference of what it is to actually not just take a good photo, because anyone can happen to take a good photo. You can take 1,000 photos and come away with a good photo.
Right.
But how do you make a good photo? And how do you actually construct from the ground up? Or how do you think critically as what do you actually want in your frame? And how do you want the subject to be? And all of those things. So getting that long way to say, in a lot of these classes, we would actually have to find an ad and we'd have to try to light it the exact same way. So it would cause it. So if you're looking at another artist's work, another photographer's work, and trying to do what they did, figure out how it was lit, and critically shoot in a way that you're sort of copying that, I think that is a great way to learn. But it also, you have to get to a point where it's almost like learning an instrument. You learn the basic chords, you learn the basic scales, but then once you master the scales, you learn to then be able to improvise, and it frees you up to create. So that's sort of a deal where you can figure out photographers that you love and try to shoot like them. I generally recommend looking at, if you're a wedding photographer, look in the fashion world. Look at, as a wedding photographer, you have to be good at so many different types of photography. You have to be a good product photographer. You have to be a good event photographer. You've got to be a good destination travel photographer. You've got to be a fashion photographer, a family photographer, all these different things. So you could be looking at like a Bon Appetit magazine and get inspired for how you're going to shoot food that the caterer presents to your guests. How to, architecture of how you're going to shoot these locations that you're at. So getting inspiration from other sources versus just looking at wedding blogs as a wedding photographer.
How much of your success do you attribute? Let's specifically zoom in on the financial piece for a second. How much of your current success do you attribute to your business background at USC? I think I heard that right, correct?
Yes. I think I'm a good photographer, but I think there are a lot of photographers that are better than I am, and are a lot of photographers that are incredibly talented. I think that, I don't know if it's from business school I really learned something that is going to be applied to my photography, but I think having a solid business background and more of a business mindset has probably made me more successful than most of my friends or colleagues.
So how much does that play a part in what you recommend somebody do? Let's take, for instance, somebody wants to get started and they hear everything that you've said up until now, but as far as the business piece goes, what do you tell somebody about that? What does somebody need to do to really have some sort of a foundation regarding their company, their business?
Yeah, I actually was just listening to your interview with Jeremy Cowart, and he was talking about you need to find that other half.
You got to get somebody, yeah.
Totally.
Right.
Like I've interviewed a few husband-wife teams, and the husband is a little bit more accounting savvy and business savvy and customer service savvy, where the wife is a little bit more creative. And so having a teammate really helps if you are not wired that way at all.
Right.
Or finding somebody, if you're just getting started, that you could bring on as a partner and have them be a part of your team that is really good at that. So instead of trying to get better at your weaknesses, really focus on your strengths and bring someone on that is good in those areas would be the first step. I don't think you need to go to business school to get a degree to then come back and be a photographer.
Good.
But I would definitely make a note that the business side of things is as important as how creative you are as a photographer, or how good you are as a photographer.
Is there a formula to all this? Does a formula exist?
A formula for what?
For achieving success, regarding all the things that you're talking about. I mean, is it essentially, because I've heard a lot of people give a lot of advice along these lines, but the common thread to me always seems like hard work, elbow grease. You got to dive into it. And for instance, I hear you saying, well, don't quit your day job, which I think is great advice, especially at the beginning. But then I also hear you say, you got to shoot all the time. You got to get in there. You got to make it happen. This is what I'm hearing you say. And so to me, that looks like a very busy time of your life.
Oh, yes.
Okay. I wish I could throw your expression on the podcast.
It is.
That was perfect.
So I am also someone who is, I don't know, maybe we could say if I have a superpower, it's that I am extremely high capacity. And that has my kryptonite has been...
Unpack that a little bit. High capacity is your superpower.
So, for example, I let's go with being a youth pastor those days.
Yep.
I was shooting bands 4 nights a week in LA, which is an hour drive away, which is, getting home at 1 to 2 a.m. I would be driving up after I would have like youth group at 7, getting done at like 7:30, 8 p.m., doing that, hustling, doing everything during my day job, shooting events, shooting families. When I decided to finally go full-time with weddings, I was shooting 65 weddings per year, including engagement shoots in every package, plus still shooting bands, plus shooting families, plus shooting additional engagement shoots. And so that I did that pace for probably 3 years until...
Were you married then?
I was married. I saw my second photographers more than I saw my wife, I think.
Yeah.
And
right.
So I was able to do that pace pretty well. And I would say like the kryptonite that's happened is now the 4th child, where it's like lack of sleep is like finally started to catch up. But I was able to do that pace, and I was able to, like, a third wedding on a weekend, I was actually more energized than the first wedding based on like the couple, the location, the cool. So I'm the capacity that I have is able to do that, and back, we sort of got off on a tangent, but back to like the current state of things, like I am still, a full-time professional destination wedding photographer. Like this next 2 months, I'm gone 3 to 4 days out of the 7 days a week, every week. And I have launched another business called Film Supply Club, which I launched last year. And it is a pretty massive amount of time, and it's become this incredible thing. We could talk more about that, what that is. I run a podcast called The Artist Report, which then spun off into The Photo Report, based on, the idea of what makes people successful and the business side of being creative, which is what I'm intrigued by. So, and then I have 4 kids, and, so I guess that is the continuation of my high capacity. Is maybe I'm not shooting that volume. I've really scaled down based on how I'm pricing myself, and being able to still survive and like hit that.
But you're still doing a lot of stuff.
And still doing a lot of stuff.
You're a very high you remind me of my wife in a sense. How do you take time out? Do you have to force yourself to stop for a while sometimes?
Oh yeah. Yeah. I'm not, that has been, if my wife would peg a weakness on me, it would be that I never stop working. And I'm not good at just being. Here's a good example is when we were first married, we were dating, and she was going out with me every night. She was coming out with me to concerts. Like, this is amazing. Like, I've got, like, she's just like me. And then we get married, and not as much, she's not coming out quite as much, or like I'm having to learn to say no, which was really difficult for me. But she asked me, she's like, hey, can we just have at least like 1 to 2 nights a week where we can just hang out? Yeah. And I legitimately asked her, like, I don't like hang out. What do you like? What would we do?
What would we do?
What do you mean hang out? So honestly, I didn't know what. I had never done that. I was always doing. When I was single, like my capacity was. If I didn't have a wife and 4 kids, I would be, it probably would not be healthy the way that I'd be living.
Right.
But, so that is, I guess, more of an insight into my own crazy head, is like or maybe just my dementia of not even knowing how to hang out.
It seems to me then, given all these facts, that it's more important for even for someone like yourself, as opposed to other people that don't even have the capacity that you do, that it's more important than ever for you to be profitable with your time.
Absolutely.
So how do you price so that you are? See how I came back to that? But I am intrigued by that, because you're constantly going, right? And so if you're working all those hours, it only stands to reason that your time is super important, because you have the same amount of time as everybody else. You don't have more hours in a day than I do or anybody else. So how do you make sure that you're compensated for those hours so that you can look back and say, yes, that was worth it?
I think that's 2 different answers to that question. One is I'm probably not compensated appropriately for my time. because a lot of my time is spent on things that I think have potential to be things. Like all this stuff I've been doing for the Artist Report, I've been doing that for 2 years. And I started off doing that all video, which was a really great idea, but foolish idea, because video production is way more consuming than just audio production. And having most everyone, I had to be on location with the people that I'm interviewing. So I was driving to LA and like, getting a film crew and just silly. But in terms of with weddings, I had to get to a point of, I guess I couldn't go at that pace anymore for the sake of my marriage and my children and I guess my own sanity. So a few things that I did, and this was, if I'm teaching like someone how to strategize on their pricing or how to increase their prices, because it's really scary to increase your prices.
Terrifying.
Terrifying. So I guess let me start. When my very first year starting to shoot, I started at $5,000, which for a lot of the friends that I had that had been shooting for a few years, it was a higher price point than where they were. And so when I came in there, again, I was not giving my pricing out. And so I wanted to meet face to face, because in regards to building my brand and making the connection with couples that I really wanted to be shooting, I wanted to see if they were hip. I wanted to see if they were cute. I wanted to see if they had chemistry, or if we could have chemistry talking face to face or screen to screen.
Yep.
Because, man, for me, the biggest life suck is shooting a couple that I don't connect with, or I feel like it's just like I'm having to work so hard to get them to do what I need them to do.
Regardless of the money. Regardless of the compensation.
Totally. Yeah. And we can go talking into like when I got to a really high price point and sort of the shift that happened with some of my clientele, and which was just, it made my heart hurt a little bit in regards to like the couples. But so with pricing, starting at $5,000, I would always meet with a couple, because I didn't want the pricing just to see that to be the thing that they were deciding on whether or not they wanted to book me.
Right.
I wanted to be able to charm them a little bit. I wanted to be able to connect with them. So, and I would say if I'm good at anything in my photography business, I can kill a client meeting. Like if a couple is near my budget, and I feel like I can generally get them to book. And
they're going to walk away and they're going to say, yeah, even if they say, yeah, he's pricey, they're going to be like, but we want him.
Yeah. And I've had couples completely like change their photo budget to have me, which is incredibly flattering. And, but so the thing that I'm doing, and if the coaching part of this would be saying like, listen, have a conversation with this couple and don't talk anything photography. Find out about them, get them talking, hear about them, hear their story, find out what they do, find out what they love, find out the places they love to go. And that gets you to know them. And then generally by the end, like we've been talking for 30 minutes almost. And then it's like, so do you guys want to hear about my photography? Like, oh yeah. So then it gets into that and I explain what I do and how I do it and my connection with the couples. And then towards the end of the conversation, I like to ask them first, like, so do you guys have an idea of where you have your photo budget? And again, like this, it's changed now from where it was, like, let's say in my first couple of years. And so typically, like, let's say their pricing was $3,500. If this is a couple that I really liked, then I can come in and say, hey, listen, my pricing starts at $5,000 usually. I really like you guys, and I would love to shoot your wedding, because for me, I've found like I would much rather shoot a couple that I enjoy for less money than a couple that I don't enjoy for more money.
That makes sense.
So, man, I would love to make this work for you. Do you think you could come up to $4,000? And so I was discounting my prices for sure, but what that did for these couples, and it was interesting, like as I was doing it, I started to realize, is that it gave them this perception that, one, I'm like pricing is a perception driver. You look at this with branding, you look at this for major companies, Louis Vuitton, they're priced really high. Is their quality of bag that much better? Probably not. But
well, it isn't. There's a law of diminishing returns, right? But they have to be priced that high because it's what their customers expect.
Exactly. So
like they have a clientele that wants to pay that much.
Yeah, totally. So pricing for sure sets a perception. So now, at that level, I was perceived as a photographer that I was perceived as a $5,000 photographer.
Right.
And now, so they see that, but now they're also grateful that I came in and, was able to give them a discount. So now they're getting this photographer that was above what they were hoping for, and they're getting it for a discount. So they're grateful as well. And so it really bred this, then they were excited to have me on their wedding day. And
are you adjusting your package at the same time, or are you giving them the $5,000 package for a discount?
So
are you cutting down your hours? Are you cutting out
at that time? I was giving them the $5,000 package.
Okay.
This is it wasn't my first year. It was. I was trying to think. In the first 3 years I was shooting, I was maybe doing 10 weddings a year, and then when I went full time, I went from 10 weddings to 65 weddings. Between the last weekend of April and December, 65 weddings in that period. It's ridiculous.
It is.
So yeah, I guess that is a long answer to how I was strategizing that initially. Or the other thing is they said they have 6,500 in the budget. So then that way I was like, okay, perfect. That way, my prices usually start for base coverage at 5,000, but now at 6,500 we can include an album in there.
Right.
Or we can now you want, instead of 8 hours, you want 10 hours. So it basically it allowed for me to then present my actual normal packages and get them in there. But pricing was also a way that I was able to sort of judge the couples that I wanted to book. So let's say there was no connection, they don't know my pricing, and they come in and their budget is $2,500. I can just say, I am so sorry. I usually start at 5,000. My packages usually average around 6,500.
And then that ends the conversation?
And that sort of ends the conversation. And
what if you really want those people?
That's what I'm saying. Is if this was a couple that I didn't want, I didn't budge on my pricing.
I understand.
But then if it was a couple that I did really want to shoot, I didn't want to eliminate the couples that I really wanted to shoot that I felt would build my portfolio in the way that I wanted it to be built. Because the things you put out online, the things you put on your blog, the things you put on Instagram are the things you're going to attract back to you. And I knew that really early on. And so I was really trying to find those couples to shoot regardless of their price point. And when you're shooting that many weddings a year, you can afford to take a couple at a discount.
Well, that's true. On the flip side, have you ever experienced someone that has come in and you've thought to yourself after 10 minutes, I really don't ever want to see these people again?
Yeah.
And then they say, our budget's $80,000 for photography. And I don't mean 80, but I mean flip it. Have you ever had that happen?
Yes. And at that
or
stage,
something like that happen.
I don't know if I would. I don't know if I would still say yes, but at that stage, it's sort of you could come in there too and triple your prices, and then if they pay your prices, then it's sort of you're getting paid for the pain.
You're getting paid for the agony.
Yeah. And then at that stage, it's just sort of taking a paycheck, and that's your other, and then it affords for you to take on the other clients at maybe a lesser fee that you really want to be shooting.
That's really interesting. What happens when you do raise your prices and you have people that knew or maybe that were familiar with lower prices or thought it was going to be lower, and then they complain and they're like, wait a second, I thought this was 5,000 and now you're saying you start at 8,000 or whatever. How do you handle a situation like that?
So I don't think there's not a lot of repeat clientele, and I don't have my prices on the site, so people haven't really known my pricing before they're really inquiring with me. So for the most part, the only repeat type of business that I really get is that same sort of architectural, or it's a family and they've year after year. And then at that stage, I've sometimes just honored that base price because they're shooting with me often, and sort of keep it and say, hey, listen, I'm usually charging this now, but I love shooting you guys and would love to keep doing it. So keep you at that price point.
Yeah, we've had a lot of sisters though. The sister gets married and it's 3 years later. I mean, do you just say, well, it's been 3 years?
Yeah, and I have had that. I've got a family with 4 daughters, and I'm on the 3rd daughter now, and prices have come up a bit, but I still actually am giving them a bit of a discount based on that. Not even the repeat business, but I don't want to exclude them because I know I'm creeping up on being pretty high.
Well, and do you ever? I mean, when you're talking to other photographers, don't you ever just say, "Hey, look, you're the boss. You can do this. If you want to lower the price, you can."
Totally.
Right? If you want to call it a discount, feel free. Or if you just want to say, hey, I'll do this for whatever, you can do that. And then decide not to do it for the next person.
Yeah. No, I had a really scary year. I mean, my overhead here in California is really high. I own a house.
I can't even imagine.
And my kids were on the poor side of the rich town, so I have to private school my kids, and it's expensive. And I had a year where I raised my prices, I think a little too high, and I was not budging on those prices, and I did not book enough, and it got really scary. Where it's like, crap, and then it puts this really big stress and this pressure on. And so there is a number and a lever where it's the law of diminishing returns. Where if you're maybe just dropping your prices by $500. What if you book 4 more events? Like you've just made way more money than what that additional amount was. So being able to really figure that out. One of the things that got hard for me, going from like 5,000 to 7,500, I was able to still do that with the organic. A lot of it was like leads coming from blogs I'd been featured on. Right. But what started to happen when I got out of that price point, I started to price myself out of the wedding planners that were referring me. I was now too expensive for their usual clientele. And so then I was a little too expensive for most organic couples just coming to me. And so that is the part that got really tough, because the relationships that I'd spent so much time building and cultivating and, grooming, those ones I now was sort of priced out of. And so that put me in a really tough situation.
What'd you do?
I don't remember, but I started so one of the things I did early on, which I don't do quite as much just because of capacity, is I lived with the motto is be all places all the time. And then also it's like I would go to events, and also lived by the motto is be unforgettable. So I went to almost every industry event that I could imagine. And I was always, as that extrovert, just meeting people, getting to know people, because people hire people they know, and they hire people that they like. So the only way for that to happen is to be with people, get to know them, and have a relationship. So I just was hustling really hard and had to develop more relationships up in LA. And then from there, I started going to a conference called Engage. And that's planners from all over the country. And it's they consider that the event for the luxury, wedding vendors. Luxury market wedding vendors. And so they have topics there dealing with the billionaire client versus the millionaire client, and the planners that are like dealing with those with those couples. So I started, that's also a thing. You can't go once and think you're going to get something out of it. But I've gone for probably 4 years now and really invested. It's not cheap to go either. So invested time and money to really cultivate new relationships. And that has me traveling a lot more from there.
So you essentially shifted your networking process. Is that fair? I'm trying to call it something.
Yeah, shifted my networking.
Trying to label what you were doing.
Shifted my networking process, and I think a lot of it was just sort of sticking to my guns and not being afraid of that price point. Or the thing that would happen is I would get nervous that I'm not booking enough. So I would say yes to something at sort of maybe where my old price point was. And then like down the road through these relationships that I've been building for 3+ years, they would finally come to me with this like $20,000 weekend, and I would be booked with a $6,500 job, kicking myself. So that's the really hard part of when you do increase your prices. If you're saying yes to these other lower end gigs, you're saying no to the potential of this one coming your way.
Absolutely.
The other hard side of that too is if you're saying no, that weekend night might not book, so that's the part that's really, really difficult to guess in this world.
So, there is a point, it seems, at least in your career, where there is a bit of a leap of faith, and you have to stick to it.
It's a leap of faith, but I think it's a bit of a calculated leap of faith. Like at this stage, I think with every, especially wedding photographer, any gig-based artist, there's almost the feast and famine, and you always get to that time of year where it's like you don't feel like you have enough booked, and then it's this freak out and this stress, and it's like that doesn't ever accomplish anything. You know,
Right.
it's like your time would be so much better spent like doing something that could actually move the needle in that direction. Like if you're slow, go out and create a shoot for yourself. Go out and like shoot something that you can build into your portfolio that could actually like generate leads, or invest in those relationships, or but I have found stressing over the valleys, the troughs in your seasons, never really do anything, and I feel like things always end up coming around historically. Right. So I'm not.
I like one of your talks that I saw, you were talking about hustling, but you were talking about hustling with purpose, because otherwise it's just being busy. And I think you said, just being busy for the sake of busyness is really awful. So I appreciated the hustle with purpose. And what I hear you saying now is, like, if you do start to sink into one of those valleys, make something happen, get after it.
Totally.
Hustle, but hustle with purpose. Hustle with something in mind.
And the hustle with purpose really comes from the culture that I think we're now surrounded in, where if you just like are at a coffee shop, you listen to people that are just running into each other, that know each other, like, hey, how are you doing? It's like, oh man, busy. How are you?
So busy.
I'm so busy.
Yeah.
And they're saying it as like this badge of honor.
Yeah.
Where it's like, that's not a good thing. Like, being busy sucks. Being busy is not fun.
Right.
What you want is to not be busy, but be successful.
Right.
So
right.
how do you intentionally hustle? Do it. Don't just be returning emails. Like, that's busy. And with busy, that's not fun.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I guess there's that. It's just really being thoughtful with your hustle. And I mean, if you haven't read the book 4 Hour Workweek, read the book 4 Hour Workweek by Tim Ferriss. That guy works way more than 4 hours, but the thesis of the book is really, after, like, you can do a lot of the work you do in a full 8-hour day in way less time if you consolidate it and you're intentional with it.
What else? That brings me to actually one of my last questions. Maybe this is my last question. It's about consuming media. Are you a reader?
Yes. Massive.
And
well, I'm an audio listener. I don't have time. I lie. I was gonna say I don't have time. I've been actually enjoying and forcing myself to have a little bit of downtime where I read books for pleasure, but I consume a massive amount of business books and podcasts and information that way, all audio.
So 4 Hour Workweek. What are your other recommendations, either books or podcasts?
Let me just think through books that I have gone through. I mean, I'm probably going through about 3 to 4 books a month.
So almost a book a week you kind of roll through.
Yeah.
And you're listening to them, so you're doing other things while you're listening.
A lot of them is I drive a lot.
Multitask.
I drive a lot. I have a lot of 3-hour drives, hour drives, but I listen to them to and from my office. I listen to them as I'm doing dishes. I listen to them generally if I'm not doing something that involves like using words, like writing an email or having to read something, then I'm listening to something. So, I mean, currently with the business that I have, Film Supply Club, I really believe in need to know learning. So I'm trying to read things based around skills that I'm trying to use right now. So what I'm trying to do is scale a business. It's grown. I have about 400 members. I just earlier this year brought someone on full time to be helping me with Film Supply Club. And what that is, it's basically it's a member-based community where have done a lot to build relationships with basically any sort of tool that you need as a photographer. You can get as a discount as a member, but it started out as film is expensive. Let us help you save money on film. So you pay an annual membership fee, which is really, it's like either $5 a month to $10 a month, $12 a month, to then get wholesale pricing on film. So people that are shooting film are saving thousands of dollars a year at Film Supply Club. But we've sort of this last year expanded to be more than just film photography, but then we have everything from like hotel partners, like the Standard Hotel and Bunkhouse Hotels, to your gallery hosting, to accounting services, virtual accountants, bookkeeping. virtual assistants. So we have so many different things that are really, really resourceful for photographers, and bringing on products like educational products and other, bags and gear. So have a lot going on there. So I'm really trying to learn how
You're learning about scaling.
What's that?
You're currently trying to learn about scaling.
Correct. Yeah. So there's a book called Scaling Up, which I just read.
Oh.
A really, really interesting read. If you've heard of, it's a incubator program for startups up in Silicon Valley called Y Combinator, but it's a book called The Launch Pad, and it's basically an inside going through one of the classes going through Y Combinator. Really, really interesting. The Traction was a really good book, and that's really about how to that would really apply for photography as well, of just how do you really market your brand and get traction with that. I love this Building a Story Brand by Don Miller. Just read that book.
Oh yeah, he's a stud.
Oh, so okay, a couple good books that would apply to everyone. So there's The One Thing is amazing. It's really talking about how multitasking really is inefficient and focusing on one thing and getting it done. Similar type of book is called Essentialism.
Oh, I know that one. Yep.
Really, really good. Then I could keep going on. Profit First is actually a really, really great book. Have you heard of that?
No, but that probably applies to exactly what we're talking about.
So Profit First applies to how many businesses are, especially small businesses, are living paycheck to paycheck. Yeah. So what the whole premise of it, you set up several different bank accounts, and so now when I get I get a check coming in for a gig, I automatically put a portion of that check, like 20% into taxes. I put 2% into a little profit deal, and then I put the rest into operating expenses. And so it's what it does is it sets you up to actually have profit from the beginning, because work expands to the time given, money expands to the money given, all that sort of stuff. But
so at the end of the year, you have an account with profit in it.
With profit in it, and when taxes come, you have money set aside to pay your taxes
for that.
And
right.
Versus being like, holy crap, I owe so much money, and what do I do?
Where's the best place for people to find you?
Yeah, well, if people are interested in Film Supply Club, I made a little page for you. It's filmsupply.club/Jed. Just your name.
My word.
And if you go there and want to sign up, you will get a $20 gift card to use in the store if you become a member. So if you sign up through that link, but check it out, filmsupply.club/Jed, and see what that is. Or you could check out, for photographers, the podcast is The Photo Report. And so thephotoreport.com, or you could look up on any podcast device that you listen on, The Photo Report. Also have the Artist Report. That's not photography related, but definitely creative and business related.
Wow,
and
you have a tremendous amount going on. Thank you for giving me an hour of your time today.
You are welcome. Thank you. And I guess if you want to look at my photography,
there's
the point
that
of this
too.
Conversation, that would just be braedonphotography.com, and it's BRAEDON.
Check it out, y'all. Thanks for a wonderful, stimulating conversation and lots of information, Braedon Flynn.
Well, thank you, Jed. It was really fun to be on here with you.
Until next time.
All right.